a few minutes after 6:30. I think we can go ahead and get started. How's everyone doing tonight? Anybody have any trouble finding our room or the building or anything? Good. Well, welcome to school, or back to school. Welcome to Mitchell Community College. My name is Bill Kearney, and I work here in the community at my own financial planning firm. And Mitchell has me come in to do what we call continuing education courses for adults. And so we do those on various topics throughout the year. And so tonight's topic is on buying timeshares. That's what you guys are all here for, right? We're not doing, okay, we got to change the presentation. Yeah, no, not buying timeshares. Tonight is taxes and retirement, which is our class for tonight. Inside your folders, let me give you a little bit of what's in there. There's a few handouts in here you'll want to keep with you. The one that has all the numbers on it, because that's a slide and it's very hard to see. So that's one that we'll look at. And then the two tax bracket slides, which go and list, it says current law and final plan. It's actually now the old law and the new plan, because this has been passed into law. But those are the three that you'll kind of want to have in front of you as we go through. And all of this is yours to take home with you, except for the response form, the workshop response form. So if you're going to take notes on anything, just don't take it on that one, because I need you to leave that one with us. But you're free to take notes on anything else. Does everybody have a pen to write with? We're all good there? Okay. As I mentioned, I have a private company, and I want you guys to know that I'm not selling anything tonight. This is strictly information related. However, it is always my goal that if you hear things tonight that raise questions or concerns or whatever, and you would like to come in and talk maybe more one-on-one, I always offer the opportunity to do that as a consultation, no obligation, and so I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that when we get to the end, okay? So just relax and take in as much as you can. In all of our classes, we have a disclaimer, and I actually put this in your folder as well. I'm not going to read that to you word for word, but basically what it says is, this class is of a general nature. I'm not giving anybody specific tax or retirement planning advice. I always do like to say that if you learn some things tonight and you apply them to your situation and it works out wonderful and you'd like to give us credit for it, we'll be happy to take that. But otherwise, just a general presentation of what we're doing tonight. And I also want you guys to know the lens that I bring to this class, because I am what I would call a retirement income planner. We're not just asset managers or insurance people. We work to provide retirement plans that are more comprehensive in nature. Income planning, tax, investments, healthcare, and estate are kind of the main areas that we go into. We feel like if you're going to talk about a specific topic, you have to know that what you do in the area of taxes with your retirement will have effect on all of your other areas here as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And you might want to turn the lights down. I think these are a little bit, is that a little better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there you go. And we have the lamp for some nice, comfortable ambient lighting over there. Hopefully nobody falls asleep. But this is just a way for me to kind of give you an analogy or a way that I view all of this whole topic of whether it's taxes or income planning or whatever. If you're going to go on a journey, and that's what I really feel like any of these topics are, you're going on a journey, you need a plan. If you're going to go on vacation, what do you need? You need a plan, you need a map, right? My family and I went to upstate New York for this summer. And I thought it was kind of a novelty to actually buy a real map. You know, nobody uses them anymore. We use our phones and we use all these electronic devices. And the rest of the family made fun of me for having the map, because they're like, we don't need that. What are you getting a paper map for? And so I got the highlighter out and I highlighted the whole route that we were going on. And lo and behold, about 3 hours into our trip, we had used up all of the data on our plan. I didn't realize that's how it worked with our plan, at least. So we couldn't get any more information on where we were supposed to go. So that map came in really handy. When you're talking about income planning, retirement planning, taxes, you know, we're somewhere over here having this conversation, and everybody's in a different place, and everybody's really trying to get to the same place, which I call peace of mindville, which is our destination, right? Everything you do is kind of with that focus. What you have to remember is that all along your journey, there are things that are going to come up and come along that will possibly derail where you're trying to go. And ultimately, you may end up in somewhere called somewhere elseville, which is not desirable. And so the purpose is, I just want you guys to remember in talking about all of this, is that if you fix your tax problem, if you figure out you got a tax problem and you go fix it, there are still other retirement risks out there that can derail everything you're trying to do. Just keep that in mind. We'll go through a little bit more of that. And then what I do, just as an example of this, is we have something called a perpetual retirement income machine. And it's just a way to picture how to build an income plan and how to deal with the different retirement risks. You'll notice up at the very top, it says tax minimizer. So if you're looking at your income plan or your retirement planning and it's like building a machine that you want to work together and you want to run really well, the tax minimizing part that we're going to talk about tonight is just one component of that. But it's a very, very important component. Okay? I also included in your folders what I would call a parts list for our machine, just so you kind of get an idea of how you deal with different retirement risks. This whole thing with the tax minimizer, even before the new tax code, the Trump tax code, if you want to call it that. And by the way, we'll call it the Trump tax code. I'm not getting political. I probably love them or hate them. It's just the name we're calling it, just to kind of distinguish that. Even before any of these changes came into play, a lot of the tax minimizer strategies really, really helped people over the long term of their retirement. It just so happens what I think you'll see tonight is it's made it even more beneficial to start thinking about how to deal with all of this. So I just wanted you guys to see a little bit of the lens that we use in doing that. Now, there's basically three things that we talk about with qualified plans. And when I say qualified plan, somebody just shout, give me an example. What's a qualified plan? 401k. What else? What was that?
Some of your Roth IRAs.
Roth IRAs. What else? Pension could be. What about an IRA? What about a 403b or 457? These are all numbers in the tax code. That's where they're designated from. Okay? And in this case, I heard somebody say Roth IRA. We're actually going to talk about Roth IRAs tonight. In this case, with the qualified retirement accounts, we're talking about ones that are pre-tax. All of the other ones we listed are funded with pre-tax dollars, which means you put that money into those accounts and you receive the tax deduction for doing so, right? And so that's the difference with qualified plans. So you may hear me say this a couple of times too. How you save and invest during your working years is so different in how it has to be during your retirement years. And qualified plans are a good example of that. Sometimes they lead to really, really big tax-related problems during your retirement years. We're talking about some of those tonight. The tax code that was put into effect offers some new opportunities to save significantly. It's for a limited period of time. As of right now, the tax code that's in place is set to expire in 2026, which seems way out of the future, but that will get here quickly. So I think one side's trying to make them permanent, one side's trying to get rid of them and repeal them, and that's the battle that's going on right now. One of them, I guess, in our political society. And here's the thing, we see, in what I do, I see a lot of people who are retiring now or retiring soon that make a big mistake with their planning. And we're going to talk about that tonight, so hopefully you guys don't make those same mistakes and have that same kind of pain we've seen with some of these, okay? Now, I know it's a little dark in here to see all of this. This is where we're going to get onto this slide, and I can talk you through what these numbers are on this page. But I want to ask you guys a question. How does saving tax on $155,000 of income lead to paying tax on over $1 million? Anybody know how that might happen?
Yes, it's through growth over a period of time.
Right. If you pull out this page, and if you can see it, I'll talk you through what you're looking at here. On this slide here, and it's not coming up on my screen, $155,000 is $5,000 a year put into an IRA. You get to take a tax deduction for 31 years. So 5,000 times 31 is $155,000, okay? So let's say somebody does that from age 35 to 65. All right? That's one extra year, so that's your 31 years. And then at age 66, they start drawing money out of the account. That's what you'll see on this page here. So for 31 years, they put the money aside, then they start drawing out until age 85, when this example, the person passes away. So they would have put in $155,000. It would have grown over that 31 years to $528,000, at which point they start drawing income from their IRA for 20 years. At the end of 20 years, they've taken out $529,000, so almost everything they had, but it was still growing. So even when they pass away, the account still has about $632,000 that they pass on to their beneficiaries. So while it provided them with $529,000, they pass on $628,000. That's over $1 million. That $628,000 still has not been taxed. Okay? What this means is, this is an example of getting a benefit right now that might lead to a big tax problem much further on down the road. It's a classic example of pay me now or pay me later. Right? Would you rather pay, if you had the option, if you had the account, would you rather pay tax on the $155,000 or the $1 million? Right? And here's where this goes too. If any of you in here, and you might be saying, well, wait, Bill, I'm closer to the end here where I've got the $528,000. I've been putting the money in over all these years. How does this help me? Well, would you rather pay tax on the $500,000 or the $1 million? You're still there, right? But there's another point here too. If you have kids who are working and are putting money into accounts like an IRA or a 401k, and they're not receiving a match, a company match, tell them to stop. It would be far better for them to take the money, put it into an after-tax account like a Roth IRA, pay a little bit of tax now, and have no tax burden later. Okay? If that's confusing at all, anyone, talk to me after the class on that part of it. But this is something you can help with your kids right now for this particular tax problem as well. So we'll go a little bit more into that in just a minute. Now, here's the reason this is a problem. Every distribution that you take from that IRA account that we were looking at there is taxed when you take the money out, and it's taxed at your highest ordinary income rate. The distributions that you take out may put you into a higher tax bracket, and those same distributions fall into what's called a double tax. Not only are you taxed on the distribution, but it may push your Social Security into a higher tax level, where you're paying now more taxes on your Social Security. This is a big one that catches people. Back in the early 80s, and this is probably when everyone in this room was working at the very beginning of their career or somewhere in the middle, right? Congress came in, and for a solution to fix Social Security, which was insolvent at the time, they came in and they created what were known as provisional tax brackets, which said if you drew out certain amounts of money in retirement and you exceeded these provisional limits, that determined how much of your Social Security benefit would be taxed. So when you take the distributions from an IRA, those sorts of things can be taxed. They can also lead to higher tax rates on capital gains. And this is the only account that you can have that requires you to take money out of it, even if you don't want to. Does anybody know what that's called? RMD. What does RMD stand for? Required minimum distribution. And does anybody know what age you have to be, or what age you hit when that comes into play? All right, my man in the NC State shirt, you've got every single one of those questions right. What's your name, sir?
Tom.
Tom, and is this your wife here?
Yes, Marge.
Marge, Tom and Marge, okay. Now, Tom, would you role play for just a moment with me? Let's pretend that you're 70 and a half. You don't look 70 and a half, but let's pretend that you are. And you realize, hey, I've got to take money out of my IRA because of the RMD. But you're stubborn. Marge, is he stubborn? Sometimes, okay. You're stubborn, right? And you say, I don't want to take money out of that account. I don't care what the IRS says. We don't need that money. If you're stubborn about it, you say, I'm not taking money out of that account. What's the IRS going to do? They're going to penalize you. What's the penalty? Now, wait, I'm 30. Hold on, before you answer it, I'm 39. I'll be 40 in January. If I take money out early from an IRA like that, what's the penalty for me?
50%, isn't it?
That's the other answer, but mine is 10%. I get a 10% penalty. If you take it out, if you refuse to take it out, what's that penalty? 50%. So let's say you have a $25,000 required minimum distribution, and you say, I'm not taking it out. You have to pay a $12,500 penalty, plus you have to pull the money out and pay the tax, right? So if you're at 25%, you literally have a 75% penalty on that for R&D. They're going to make you take that money. So what's the lesson? Don't be stubborn, right? Don't be stubborn. The key with that, with RMD ages at 70 and a half, is it is almost always the point in your life when you have the least amount of credits and deductions to reduce your effective tax rate. If you think about it, if you're working and you're paying into a 401k, that's a deduction, right? If you're giving to charitable causes, that's a deduction, and most times we do that maybe a little bit higher rate when we're working. If the kids are at home, they're a nice little tax deduction, right? So those are kind of, and then if you have a mortgage, you get the mortgage interest deduction. Those are the big four that people generally have. When you hit 70 and a half, most of those are pretty much gone, right? So now your effective tax rate has just gone up, and all of that plays into provisional income for Social Security and everything else. So that's the RMD part of it. And this is also the highest tax account to leave to your beneficiaries. Okay, yes, sir.
Did I hear recently that they're looking at to increase the age from 70 and a half to 72?
That's been kicked around. I would bet my mortgage that that will not pass. Yeah. If anything, that would move backwards on those accounts, because if you know anything about it, we need money, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that tax increases yearly as you get older, is that correct?
It's based on, well, it's based on a percentage figure at 70 and a half, and so yeah, as you get a little bit older, it can go up a little bit. Unless, of course, you take more money out than the R&D, then your amount's going to go down. Okay. So the result, IRA, 401k, 403b, often cost you more in tax than you ever planned on. During the retirement years, you can easily argue that these are the least tax-efficient accounts that you own. That's the bad news. I'm not going to send you home with a bunch of bad news. There is some things that you can think about that you might want to do going forward. So how can the new tax code help? This is another handout that's here. This is for single filers. Remember where it says current law, right here, this is actually the old law. These were the old rules before the Trump tax cuts came into effect. So don't let that confuse you. And this is where we are now. And the reason I put this in here, and I think most everyone in the room is married, but the reason I put the single in here as well is because it's important to know that if your spouse passes away and you have to take money out of your account, your RMDs, you fall under these tax brackets now, which are the highest and the most difficult to deal with. Well, so in here, this is the married filing jointly. Now look what happened here. Over here, the 28% bracket cutoff was $233,000. Okay, so that means that if everything that you have as earned income came out to $233,000, plus you had these deductions and exemptions, so you could actually increase that by about $20,000. You could pull out $250,000 and stay in the 28% bracket. With the new code, you can go all the way up to $315,000 plus a standard deduction, so about $334,000 of income, and be in the 24% bracket. I did the research on this, guys. I can't find another time where we were anywhere close to that, where you can pull that kind of money out for less than 25%. So what this does is it says, hey, maybe we can save a little bit of money if we think about structuring these accounts a little bit better. So this is what the solution is that you can look at. Now, don't go home and just do this right away, but what people have done, what people are doing, is they'll do what's called a Roth conversion. Take the money from the IRA, in it now, convert it to a Roth, and as long as you meet certain rules, you can actually start drawing money from it right now. Okay, if you're over 59 and a half, you don't have the 5-year waiting period and those types of things on the Roth. What you're basically doing if you consider something like this is you're going to the IRS and you're saying, I want to buy you out of this relationship that I have with you. we're getting a divorce. And I'm going to buy you out. I want to pay you now, and I want you out of my life. And what happens is you put it into the Roth IRA, which now the money goes into an account that is after tax, grows tax deferred, and every dime you pull out comes out tax free. It's also tax free to your beneficiaries, to your spouse, to your kids, to your grandkids. You can leave this to anyone. Okay? So that's one potential solution. Now I tell everyone that everybody's situation is a little different. So you kind of have to study this a little bit to figure out if this works for you. But the Roth is a good idea. So here's the benefits. As I said, tax-free, assuming you follow the 5-year rules, which are age-based. If you're over 59 and a half, you have immediate access to these funds. Now money that's in a Roth, when you draw that money out, let's say you take this step. Take the IRS out of your life. Now the money's in a Roth account, and now you need money for income. When you draw that money out, it does not count towards your provisional income for Social Security taxation purposes. So now you may actually reduce your taxes on your Social Security as well. There is a little strategy that we use in our field called Power of Zero. And the goal is to help people get from where they are now, which is generally the highest effective tax rates at age 70 and a half, into actually the zero tax bracket in retirement. And that is something that is achievable. All right? Now, there's no required minimum distributions from the Roth. So now, if you want to be stubborn and not take the money out, you don't have to take the money out. They're not going to make you do it from the Roth. Tax-free inheritance. And this is immunized against future tax law changes. That's the way these work. If you put your money in that type of account, they can't come in and change the way that code is written. That's how Roth IRAs work. Let me give you an example. This is an actual real example that came into our household. And I'll back up for just a second. If you want to do a quick calculation in your head, I've done these so many times, not just Roth conversions, but these tax minimizing strategies that if you take a snapshot of where you are right now and you add up the money that you have in 401k, IRA, 403b, 457, anything that's pre-tax that you haven't paid tax on yet, if you add that all together, it's been my experience that that figure that you might be thinking of in your head is what you will generally overpay to the IRS in retirement by not having a proper tax planning strategy for your income. Okay? That is almost to the dollar. Now, it's not exact, but it's pretty close. It's a ballpark. Let me give you an example of one that happened here recently. This is a married couple. They're 65. 2017, their income was around 90-something thousand, 95,000. They were at the very top of the 15% bracket. And their goal was to do a rollover. They wanted to convert 200,000 of their IRA to a Roth IRA. Well, here's the deal. If they had done it in 2017, but they were 94,000 or so, if they take the 200,000 as income and roll it to a Roth, how much income do they have for that year? At 94 plus 200, 294,000. They're in pretty much a 28% bracket at that point. So if they had done it in 2017, it would have cost them $56,000 of tax to end that relationship with the IRS and roll it into a Roth. But I told them, I said, wait, if you guys just wait a couple of months and take the very exact step that you want to take, wait a couple of months into 2018 when the law comes into effect, now your effective tax rate is down to 22%, which means you've only got about $44,000 in tax. Now let me ask you guys, if I came to you and I said, hey, who wants to pay $44,000 in taxes right now? No one wants to do that, right? But this is going back to paying tax on the 155 or paying tax on the million. The problem is they're going to get you coming or going. So if you keep it where it is, you'll end up paying the 44 plus the 56, and then your beneficiaries will pay tax on what's left over. They'll get what's called an inherited IRA, and for the rest of their life, they'll have to draw funds out of it based on their lifespan. And that's actually what's called an inherited IRA. Here's the thing, I don't know about you guys, but it's been my experience that the people that come into my office don't feel like these rules were really explained to them very well when they started this out. Does anybody feel that way? That these are a little confusing, some of these rules in here? I think the IRS is pretty sneaky in some of the things they do. Yes, ma'am?
So if you decide you want to take the 200 and convert it over, you're really only converting over the lesser, what's left after
Correct.
tax?
Correct. That's what you would have left. Now you're at an after-tax state, right? And I was just saying the IRS has kind of got all these little secret rules. When I was a kid, we spent our summers on a lake in New York State. Anybody from New York State? Okay, Finger Lakes region in New York State. Now, when you're up there, and this is in the early 80s, right? There isn't anything to do. There's no TV or anything like that. So if we have bad weather, we go inside and we play games. We play card games. And my mom taught us how to play solitaire. Anybody play solitaire? Well, my mom plays a little differently than you probably do, because it always seemed like she had an extra column that she could create. Like an extra set of rules that would make the game benefit and work out. And I was thinking about that, you know, that's kind of like what happens here. It seems like the IRS always has an escape hatch to get the tax from you some way or another, right? It's the extra column in solitaire. I figured out later on, I don't think my mom was playing by the rules. But be that as it may, it's kind of a good example for all this. So is it a good idea to convert IRA dollars at less than 25%? I don't know. Everybody's a little different, but most times it is. Again, it's a classic example of pay me now or pay me later. And even if you go back to the $155,000 example, paying tax on that or paying tax on the million, I don't care what time value of money says, the IRS wins on that one every single time. Every single time. In my world, there are three places or three statuses that your money can exist in. Three. It's always going to be in one of these three places. It's either going to be in a taxable account, which would be like checking, savings, CDs. It's going to be in a tax-deferred account, which is what we're talking about tonight, IRA, 401k, or a tax-free account, like a Roth. Those are the only three places it can be. What the tax code has built is there are rules inside of it that help you understand how to create the right balance in those three areas. It's not that you should take all of your money from tax-deferred and put it into tax-free. Because even if you have no other deductions and credits from the IRS, with the new tax code, you have a $24,000 standard deduction as a married couple. So what that means is you might want to leave enough in your IRA so when the RMDs kick in and they make you pull out $24,000, it's offset by the credit or the deduction that the IRS gives you, the standard deduction. So don't misread what I'm saying. I'm not saying that all qualified plan accounts are bad, but there is a proper structure and balance that you want to have between all three of these. And that's how you can maximize your tax situation. Here's another one. Beware of the tax man. Now, this all sounds pretty good. Let's get the IRS out of our life. But here's what happens. This is Medicare Part B and Medicare Part D. And if you take our couple here that files a joint tax return, $170,000 or less, this is a joint return, then in 2018 they would pay $134 each per month for Medicare. But if we do that conversion, we got a little bit of a problem, because what did we say? We had 290 something thousand in income. We got to come all the way down here now in that year. Look what just happened to your premium. This is $348 per person. So that's about another 220. It's about what, $440 total per month extra for that year, which is about another $5,000 you have to pay. It's not really a tax, it's just increased premium, just for doing that Roth conversion. Then if you come over to the drug plan over here, we have to come all the way down here. Now it's another $54. Now we're looking at another, $1,000 a year for each of you for that. So, sometimes you don't convert all of it right away. You have to know what your income's going to do and how it's going to affect other things inside your plan. That's why I say when we do things that are comprehensive, if you're doing something, you got to look at it comprehensively in that part of it. This is a sneaky one that'll jump up and get people. Of course, it doesn't happen until a year later, and it's too late at that point to do anything about it. You see that? So I would say key consideration, everyone's different. This is where I say, if any of this is confusing or exciting or whatever it is to you, come in and we'll give you a second opinion on where you are and what might make sense to do all that. And this is just a portion of what a comprehensive plan should have in it. Again, as I said this somewhat less eloquently than the slide does earlier, not understanding that investing during retirement is different than investing for retirement. I think that's the number one thing that we see. People come in and they're used to being in the accumulation phase, working, saving, putting money away. Those accounts during those years may not benefit you as much during the retirement years because now you've had a shift. When you stop working, you still need to get a paycheck, right? It's just going to come from somewhere else. It can come from you. Now, my dad retired a few years ago, and when he did, he came to me and he said, look, I want you to take care of my accounts, help me with my retirement. He gave me 3 rules. And I've told this story a lot, and people will come in, and I'll tell you what they say after this, but he said, look, I just want you to protect my money. I'd really like to have some income from it, for me and your mother. And if you can, grow it a little bit. Those are his 3 rules, and I don't want to go over that too quickly. He said, I want you to protect it. I want you to provide me with some income. And if you can, I want you to grow it. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've had people come into the office and say, I want what your dad has. Whatever he did, I want that. You do that. Okay, we'll do that. But he did come up with one other rule, which he said, number 4, if I want to spend the money in retirement and not leave it to you, I want to be able to do that too. Is it okay if my dad spends his money in retirement and doesn't leave it to me? Everybody nods their head on that one. That's right. He's right about that. Yeah, sure it is. Of course it is. I think that's kind of a basis of maybe where your goals are, right? For a lot of people, this is what we're trying to get to. This is what peace of mind bill looks like. So, how do you figure out where you are with that? Well, you don't have to know what's on the screen here. This is something called a Morningstar report. Has anybody heard of Morningstar? Morningstar is a company in Chicago that does analytics on portfolios. So when people come in, look, I could take the time to go through and create all of this, or I could send it to Morningstar and they'll do it. What they do is they'll analyze all of your account statements and they'll tell you what's going on inside your accounts. Okay? So this is a couple that came in. The amounts don't matter. They had around 600,000 or so, and so we plugged everything in here. And they said, hey, what we have, Bill, what our advisor told us is we have a balanced portfolio. So I said, okay, let's look at that for a minute. Balanced portfolio. They had about 37%, 38% in U.S. stock, and about 21 or 22% non-U.S. stock, and then about 44%. This is typical. You'll see about 60-40 mix between stocks and bonds. That's kind of what the street says for a balanced portfolio. And I said, well, what were your goals when you set this up? What were you trying to achieve? And how did you pick this? And they said, well, our advisor just picked this for us. And I said, well, how did you know? How did he know? And they said, oh, our goals. Yeah, our goals were this. We wanted to protect our principal. We wanted to grow it some, right? We wanted to get a good, decent return. We wanted balance, and we didn't want to take a whole lot of risk. I said, okay. Well, I looked through their portfolio, and it said, okay, if you have a great year, you could be up 37%. That means you're pretty much doing what the market did. over that period of time. This was in, the best year they had was March of 2009. But I said, you know, if you have a bad year, this particular portfolio could lose 26%. And you said you only wanted to lose 10. How do you feel about that? In other words, if you're 600,000, if you woke up, or after a year period it was down by 150,000, how would you feel? They said they wouldn't like that. I always look at it and say, you know, if you gave me the money, or we worked on it together, we invested it, and the very first year you made 37%, how much do you like me? You're going to be looking at the couch cushions to find money to throw into whatever that is they're doing, right? But then, if the first year you come in and you lose 26%, you're not going to feel the same way, are you? Right? So they didn't realize that their portfolio was really out of balance for what they were actually seeking, and this is kind of what a snapshot or a second opinion can do. So I said to them, I said, well, your goals are kind of similar to other big investors who try to do all of this, like endowment funds. And I showed this to them. I said, you know, this is the Harvard Endowment Fund. So how does Harvard invest? This is back in 2015, but it doesn't change very much, at least the last time they published it. But Harvard has about 16% in domestic equities, fixed income is 9%, international equities are 19%, and then 52% are in alternative strategies. So this is Harvard. Imagine if you're managing the Harvard Endowment Fund. Now if you manage the Harvard Endowment Fund and you make 37% in a given year, what's Harvard going to think? They're going to like that, right? Conversely, if you're managing the Harvard Endowment Fund and you lose 26%, what do you think is going to happen to your job? You're going to get fired. So Harvard doesn't invest that way, right? So the deal was with alternative strategies is up until maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, Harvard could do alternative strategies, but you and I could not. Okay? Here's some examples of alternative strategies that Harvard's using. Real estate, commodities, life insurance, fixed index annuities, covered call writing, structured notes, reinsurance, and enhanced yield lending. And now with the way our markets are and the way our investing is, now the average person can pretty much do all of these things too. So maybe instead of having a typical 60-40 balanced portfolio with all this money in equities that could lose 26 or 30 or 40%, why don't we invest like Harvard does? Right? Are you taking on more risk than you realize is the real question there. And then isn't it a good time to get a complimentary second opinion? I'll leave that up to you guys. And just to recap what we've talked about so far, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, they often create tax problems in retirement. Here's the key. Almost anyone in the room, no matter what your age, can generally fix the problem if there is one. First, you have to know if there is one. Secondly, you have to know what it's going to take or what you're going to have to do to fix it. But a lot of times, people don't realize exactly the extent of the problem that they may have. The new tax code offers a window of opportunity where I believe, just in what I've researched, it's about the cheapest it possibly can be to eliminate some of these tax problems. As I said earlier, it doesn't mean you have to take everything you have in your IRAs and convert it all today. You need to know what the implications are and how to structure that properly. Maybe you do it over 5 years. Maybe you do it over 10 years. Okay? It doesn't all have to happen tomorrow. There is a what I would call a sweet spot where you can figure out what's the best way to do that at the lowest cost. And at the same time, many investors are taking on a lot more risk than they realize. A lot more. Right now, I hear a lot, hey, Bill, I've got a lot of money in bonds, so I'll be okay, right? Maybe. The problem is we're in a rising interest rate market right now. So if you're investing long in bonds, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get hit hard. Don't know for sure, right? So sometimes people think bonds are the safe alternative to equities, not necessarily. And then the other thing I talked about, it's on the screen here, is something called power of zero or zero tax rate. The goal here really should be, when you're talking about tax minimization inside a plan, is how do you get from where you are right now? In other words, if you do nothing, what's that going to cost you over your retirement years? And then if you make a change to a tax minimized plan, what's that going to save you? You're not doing anything outside of the IRS code. You just understand what the code is and you follow it to your advantage. And what that can do is generally get your effective tax rate down into the zero or usually single-digit brackets during retirement. More money for you to save, invest, go to vacation with the kids, whatever it is you want to do. Okay? So this is what I do. The class is not long. It's a 45-minute class and what we typically teach. We found that works pretty well. What I'll do is I'll stick around if anybody has individual questions you want to ask me from the class. But inside your folder, this is something I would really appreciate. Whether or not you want to come see me or talk about any of this again, if one of you, it's a couple, just one of you would fill out the response form with your information, that allows me, see, I know how the IRS works too. I want to be able to deduct what it costs me to put on the event, print the materials and all of that. And so I need to have proof that I did that. So you guys being here and your handwriting helps me do that. So I would appreciate it if you fill that out. On the sheet, there are some things listed on there. And I didn't go through all of them because they're not part of this particular class that I'm teaching. The retirement report card, the 401k optimizer. We talked a little bit about 401k rollovers. Learning more about the income machine that I showed you on there, portfolio x-ray. So if any of those things are of interest to you, just mark a box. All right, and at the very bottom, it says, I would like a complimentary appointment, or I'm all set for now. If you say you're all set, we'll just send you a thank you note for coming, and you won't hear from us. But if you list the complimentary, or you'd like to come in just to ask some questions, we'll get with you and figure out a time to do that. Now, when you come in to do that, first of all, my office is right over here off of Williamson Road behind the post office. So I'm pretty close. I'm just on the other side of Mooresville. But when you come in, the way I look at that appointment is there are no products discussed. It is a conversation where I'm asking you questions and you're asking me questions. And really the purpose of that meeting is to figure out if we need to have another meeting. Okay? And we'll show you a little of the tools that we do initially to show you what a snapshot looks like, and you can decide if that's something you want to do and if you want to share information to make that happen. Okay? And I always tell people too, the reason I make these complimentary, there's a reason for that. One, I know that for every 10 people that come into my office, 3 or 4 will become a client. And it's worth my time to sort through or seek through the 10 to find the 3 or 4. Okay? So we make them complimentary. We want you to feel like you're not obligated to do it, but if you'd like to, we'd certainly love to have that happen as well. Somebody raise their hand. Yes, ma'am.
Do you sell our information as far as our phone numbers?
Great question. No. And just so you guys know, I'm an independent company. I'm not affiliated with a larger firm like a Merrill Lynch or Schwab. Not that there's anything wrong with those guys, but you're looking at it. That's my wife in the back that checked you in. So we're a small shop. And no, we do not sell information to anyone. The only thing we ever do with your information, sometimes we'll email you from time to time if we have another class coming up that might be of interest to you. That's usually about it. But no, we don't sell information. Good question.
Yeah.
I don't like that either.
I signed up for something at one of the public libraries, and I've been getting bombarded with calls, and that's...
No good. No. That will not happen with us, I promise you. Because I'm the same way. I certainly don't like getting spammed in that way either. Yes, ma'am.
So, for those of us not familiar with Roth IRAs at all, you only have one if you are rolling something into it, or do you have one from the beginning?
Great question. That's a really good question. So you can start a Roth IRA at any point, and you can start funding it annually. There are funding limits on what you can put into it, and that's generally governed, well, it is governed by how much income you have. So there's probably multiple reasons why you might be asking this. Your children can do this. grandchildren can do this. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they have Roth IRAs. Now, I have to be able to justify the income or the deferred income that I'm putting in there, but we do. When they do work, I can document what they've done. If the IRS wants to come look at it, they cut the grass, or whatever it was, right? So your kids can do that. Think about that. If you put $10 a week in, and you defer that, it grows tax deferred, and then he's 11, so 55 years from now, growing at 4%. I've tried to explain to him at 11 that he's going to love deferred compensation, but he quite doesn't understand that yet. But anyhow, you can do it at any age. There's no restrictions on that. The only thing that limits is income. Generally, I think the number now is 186,000 combined household income. So if you make more than that, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA.
So is it taxed at the time that you put it in?
Correct.
So if you're putting in 10.
In other words, let's say I've got $10 in my savings account, my personal savings account. I can put that in the Roth account. It's already been taxed, right? It's sitting in an after-tax account. It's a taxable account, but that money's already been taxed. I earned it as income, right? And I paid tax on it. Now it's sitting in the savings account. So I can take that and put that in the Roth account if I want.
So, and then if the Roth account grows, do you pay tax on the
On the earnings?
earnings?
No, ma'am.
So then, are Roth IRAs invested in different things the same as regular?
They can be invested in everything that you can invest an IRA in. And that's one of the beauties about that, as well as IRAs even, is that it's an individual retirement account. The only difference is the tax status between the two. But generally, they're cheaper to administer, and you have a lot more investment options with them. Very good questions. And the Roth isn't the only one. There are other types of accounts that can function the same way. So sometimes if people, from an income standpoint, can't contribute to a Roth, there are other things they can do. It's not the only one, but it is a really good one. But again, you asked about it, your growth being taxed. No, when you pull the money out, the other key is that it does not count towards your provisional income calculations for Social Security. Provisional income is 1/2 of your Social Security benefit plus investment income that you receive, qualified distributions that you take out, add all of that together. And what they've created are thresholds. If that number adds up to less than $33,000, then none of your Social Security is taxed. So people sit there and say, how in the world do you get below $33,000? How you can't live on that? Well, the key is, it's where the income comes from. You could draw out $70,000 in income. If $30,000 of it is your provisional income from Social Security and some of your investments, and $40,000 comes from a Roth IRA, boom, you've just kept yourself below the provisional limit, and now your Social Security is tax-free. And by the way, the highest level of provisional tax is 85%, which means that if you get $1,000 a month in Social Security, $850 flows into your ordinary income and is taxed at your ordinary income rate. This is what hits people at 70.5, because when they have to start taking those distributions, boom, their provisional income shoots up, and they didn't realize that was going to happen, and now they're taking home less with Social Security too. So you see, that's how all these pieces work together. It's really, really important to take that into account. Okay? One of the really nice things about technology over the years is we have some nice tools now with web-based systems that we have that can calculate all of these things by plugging and inputting your information in. And it can tell you exactly where you are now and where it's going to go. Okay? Guys, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. If there are any other questions, please feel free to come up. And if you would leave your response form either here or give it to Natasha on the way out. And again, I really appreciate you guys being here. Yes, ma'am. He's not really stuck, is he? She's not answering.